"You're too poor to join our Christmas, go home." My mother-in-law sneered. Husband scoffed, "You're just jealous of my family." 2 months later, I pulled up to their foreclosed mansion in a Tesla paid for by my startup's Buyout. What happened next? This happened about 2 months ago, and I still can't quite believe how things turned out. To give you some background, I, 34F, married Matthew, 35M, a few years ago. His family is extremely wealthy, think mansions, high-end cars, designer everything. I'm not rich. I come from a modest background, and my career was a slow climb. Things with Matthew's family were always tense, especially with his mother, Eleanor, who made it clear early on that I wasn't good enough for her son. One Christmas, Eleanor made an awful comment to me about being too poor to join their holiday celebration, and that was the final straw. I was crushed. Matthew didn't defend me, and I realized how much I had been letting their opinions shape my self-worth. Fast forward 2 months later, and I showed up at their house in a brand new Tesla, bought with the money from a startup I'd been quietly building. Turns out, things weren't going as well for them. The mansion was in foreclosure, and the tables had turned in ways I didn't expect. I always knew things would be different when I married Matthew. We were a classic opposites attract kind of couple. He had the privilege of being born into wealth, whereas I came from a small-town family. My parents had always worked hard to make ends meet, but their idea of luxury was a vacation in the mountains, not a villa in Italy. I didn't mind, I wasn't ashamed of my background. But Matthew's family? They couldn't have cared less about my humble roots. Eleanor, Matthew's mother, was the worst of them all. Her cold stares and clipped tones made it clear from day one that I didn't fit her idea of what a daughter-in-law should be. I remember the first time I met her. We were having dinner at a fancy restaurant, and I wore a simple dress I could afford. When she greeted me, her eyes flickered over my outfit with thinly veiled judgment. The entire evening, I felt like I was being examined under a microscope. I always tried to put on a brave face, but the truth was, I could never shake the feeling that I was an outsider in Matthew's world. His family was everything to him, and I was constantly second-guessing my place in it. The more I tried to blend in, the more I felt like I was failing. And then came the Christmas that changed everything. It was a few weeks before the holiday, and Eleanor had already sent out the usual extravagant invitation. Their mansion, located in a secluded part of the city, was a sight to behold. Huge front gates, long driveway lined with trees, and a grand entrance with pillars that seemed to scream, "Look at us, we have everything." When we arrived, I could already feel the tension building in my chest. The whole family was there, cousins, aunts, uncles, and of course, Eleanor, who greeted us with that same icy smile. I had learned by then to just nod and smile, keep my opinions to myself, and avoid drawing attention. But that didn't stop Eleanor from taking every opportunity to make me feel like I didn't belong. Dinner was an endless parade of expensive dishes I had never even heard of. I sat silently, barely able to participate in conversations as they discussed their vacations, investments, and recent trips to Switzerland. They were so far removed from my reality, I felt like I was eavesdropping on another world. But then, as the night wore on and we moved to the living room to open presents, things took a turn. Matthew's brother, David, stood up to make a toast. David was everything Eleanor wanted in a son, polished, successful, and far more suited to her standards than Matthew ever was. "To family," he said, raising his glass, "and to keeping things in the family. After all, that's what matters most." I forced a smile, but my stomach churned. I knew what he meant. To them, family wasn't just about love. It was about shared wealth, connections, and status. I wasn't part of that world, and I was reminded of it every time they looked at me. Then Eleanor chimed in, her voice so cold it sent a chill down my spine. "It's good to have family around, but we have to be mindful of who we invite to these gatherings," she said, eyes fixed on me. "After all, not everyone can keep up with the lifestyle we've worked so hard to build." I froze. Her words were like daggers, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Matthew, sitting beside me, didn't even flinch. His eyes darted to his mother, but he didn't say anything. He never did when it came to her. "I don't think it's about money, Eleanor," I said quietly, trying to defuse the situation. Eleanor turned to me with a look that could freeze water. "Oh, it's always about money, dear. You can't expect to be a part of this family without understanding that." The entire room fell silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, and it was suffocating. I had always been the odd one out, but now, I realized, I would always be seen as inferior in their eyes. "Maybe we should head out," Matthew said, finally breaking the silence. He stood up, looking uncomfortable. He didn't defend me, didn't say anything to his mother. He just wanted to leave. As we were walking out the door, Eleanor called after us, "You should really know your place. I don't think you belong here. Maybe next time, don't bother." Her words hung in the air, heavy with disdain. Matthew didn't respond. We left without another word. I didn't know how to process what had just happened. How could Matthew not stand up for me? How could he let his mother treat me like that? It wasn't the first time, but something inside me snapped. I was done. Done letting Eleanor's opinions dictate my worth. Done letting Matthew's silence give her permission to treat me like an outsider. I spent the night thinking. I had worked for years on my own business, a startup I'd been building on the side. It had been a quiet journey, one I didn't share with Matthew's family, mostly because I knew they wouldn't understand or support it. But now, I realized I didn't need their support. I didn't need anyone's approval. I had been working toward a buyout for months. And 2 months later, that buyout came through, more money than I could ever have imagined. The startup I'd built was worth millions, and just like that, I was no longer the poor wife that Eleanor had looked down on. It was time to show up. The day I pulled up to their mansion, I wasn't sure what I expected, but it certainly wasn't the look on Eleanor's face. I parked the Tesla right in front of the gates, letting the car's sleek exterior do all the talking. I had no intention of stepping into their world again, but I needed to see the look on her face when she saw me. Matthew's family had fallen on hard times. The once glorious mansion that had always been a symbol of their wealth was now in foreclosure. It seemed the family who once lived in opulence had made one too many bad financial decisions. When Eleanor saw me standing there, she didn't immediately recognize me. But when she did, her expression faltered, a flicker of panic flashing across her face. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice sharp. I didn't answer right away. I simply looked at her and smiled. The last time I'd seen her, she had told me I wasn't welcome. She had made it clear that I didn't belong. But here I was, standing on the doorstep of the mansion, in a car I had bought with money they could never have imagined. My heart didn't race with revenge, but with a deep sense of liberation. I was free of their judgment. I had carved out a place for myself. "You've fallen on hard times, haven't you?" I said finally, watching her face drain of color. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice shaky now. I stepped closer, eyes locked on hers. "I just wanted to remind you that sometimes, life has a funny way of humbling people. You've spent so much time looking down on others, but look where you are now. Funny how things work out, huh?" Eleanor's eyes were wide with disbelief. You don't have the right to come here and talk to me like that." "I'm not here to fight," I said, raising my hand. "I'm just here to remind you that sometimes the world doesn't revolve around you. You might want to take a step back and reflect on how you treat people, because life has a way of balancing the scales." I turned and started walking toward the car, not giving her a second glance. The door to the mansion stood open behind me, a symbol of everything that had crumbled, everything they'd lost. As I slid into the driver's seat of my Tesla, I felt a sense of peace. For once, I wasn't looking for approval. I didn't need it. I had built my own success, and it was a success no one, especially Eleanor, could take away from me. As I drove away from Eleanor's mansion, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction, but it wasn't the satisfaction I had expected. There was no triumphant sense of revenge in my chest. Instead, there was a quiet realization that I had been given the space to redefine my worth. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone anymore, certainly not to Eleanor. It was about how I saw myself now. I hadn't expected my life to turn out this way. It had been a slow, deliberate climb. For years, I had quietly worked on building something that would give me financial independence, a sense of accomplishment, and the freedom to not have to answer to anyone's idea of my place in the world. But even so, seeing the look on Eleanor's face when she realized who I was, what I had become, still sent a rush of adrenaline through my veins. It was the kind of vindication I had longed for, even though it felt hollow at the time. The reality was, I wasn't truly interested in what Eleanor thought of me. I never was, not really. But in the back of my mind, I had always wanted to show her that I wasn't the small-town girl she thought I was. I wasn't a charity case, nor was I just a girl along for the ride in Matthew's world of wealth and privilege. I had built something of my own. That night, as I pulled into my apartment, the weight of the situation began to settle in. The emotions I had held back for years, frustration, anger, sadness, came flooding to the surface. I was angry at myself for staying silent for so long, for allowing Eleanor's barbs and Matthew's indifference to shape the way I viewed myself. I was angry at Matthew for never stepping in, for never truly standing up for me. And yet, there was a part of me that understood. He was a product of his environment. Eleanor had raised him to prioritize family, wealth, and appearances above all else. I was an anomaly in that world, an outsider. But that didn't mean I had to stay in that role forever. Over the next few weeks, I focused on what mattered, my business. The buyout was official, and the money I had earned from my startup was now mine. My days were filled with strategy meetings and plans for the future, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. I hadn't spoken to Matthew since that night at his family's house. He hadn't reached out to apologize, and I hadn't bothered to either. But even though I told myself I didn't need him, there was still a gnawing feeling in my chest. We had been together for years, after all. Was it really over between us? I knew that the rift between us wasn't just about his family. It was about how our worlds were too different. How he could never fully understand what it was like to feel like an outsider, to work so hard to prove yourself, to claw your way up from nothing. I had spent so long pretending that the differences didn't matter, that they didn't sting. But the truth was, they had been there all along, lurking just beneath the surface. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Matthew might never be able to meet me halfway. He would always be tied to his family, to their expectations, to their way of life. And I was learning to let go of all of that. Then, one evening, as I sat on the balcony of my apartment, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, I got a call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, my finger hovering over the screen. But something told me to pick up. It was Matthew. Hey, his voice was hesitant, distant. It didn't sound like the confident, charming man I had married. I'd been thinking a lot about what happened. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. I'm not sure there's much more to say, Matthew. No, I know, he said quickly. But I wanted to apologize. For everything. For not defending you that night, for letting my mom treat you like that. I'm sorry. I didn't realize how bad it was until you were gone. I blinked, taken aback. The apology was unexpected, and I didn't know how to respond. A small part of me had wanted this, but another part of me was unsure if it was too late. I appreciate it, I said softly. But I need you to understand something. This isn't just about that night. It's about everything, Matthew. You've always been caught in the middle between me and your family. I can't keep doing that. I can't keep being the one to make the sacrifices for the sake of keeping the peace. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the soft sound of his breathing, but he didn't speak for a few moments. I get it, he said finally, his voice quieter now. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I do see what I've done. I've been selfish. I don't know if I can forgive you, Matthew, I said, my voice steady but firm. I've spent too many years feeling like I didn't matter, like I wasn't enough. And I can't keep going like this. I heard him let out a shaky breath. So, what happens now? I don't know, I replied honestly. I need space. I need to figure out what I want. I've spent too long trying to fit into your world, trying to please people who don't even care about me. I've realized that I'm the only one who can define my worth. There was silence for a moment before Matthew spoke again, his voice breaking slightly. I never meant to hurt you. But I understand if you can't do this anymore. Maybe you'll understand one day, I said, the words leaving my mouth with a finality I hadn't expected. But for now, I need to figure out who I am without the weight of your family's expectations hanging over me. The call ended shortly after, leaving me sitting in the dim light of my apartment, staring out at the city skyline. It felt like a chapter had closed, but it also felt like something had shifted. Maybe I wasn't ready to say goodbye forever, but I knew I had to take this time for myself. I had spent so many years trying to fit into a world that wasn't mine, and now, I was learning to embrace my own. I spent the next few days focusing on my business, on the future I was building. I hired a new team to help me scale the company, and I started making plans for the next big step. It felt like freedom, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. But in the back of my mind, I knew that the question of Matthew, of our relationship, still lingered. One evening, as I sat at my desk, I received another call from Matthew. I didn't hesitate this time. I picked up. What is it? I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. I just wanted to check in, he said quietly. How are you doing? I paused, thinking carefully about my response. I'm doing better, I said finally. I'm figuring things out. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm not looking back anymore. There was a pause on the other end. Then Matthew spoke softly, I still love you. I swallowed hard, feeling the lump in my throat. The words echoed in my mind, and for the first time in a long time I didn't know what to say. But as I sat there, staring out at the night sky, I realized something important. I wasn't waiting for him anymore. I wasn't waiting for his approval, or for his family's validation. I was waiting for my own life to unfold on my own terms. And that was the only thing I needed to focus on. As for what would happen between us, well, that was something I wasn't ready to answer yet. But for the first time in a long while, I was okay with not knowing. As the days passed, I found myself becoming more and more comfortable in the life I was building without Matthew, without Eleanor, and without their expectations hanging over me. I hadn't fully processed what had happened between us yet, but I could feel something inside me changing. I had found the courage to stand up for myself, to carve out my own path, and that had made all the difference. But despite all the progress I was making, there was still one last thing on my mind: how things had ended with Matthew's family. I knew the damage was done, and I wasn't interested in trying to fix it anymore. But part of me still felt that tiny seed of doubt: did I truly need to leave them all behind? Was there any chance for healing? The thing is, when you spend so many years trying to fit in and be accepted by people who never truly see you for who you are, you eventually realize that their approval isn't worth chasing. And that was the realization that solidified everything for me. Then one afternoon, I received an unexpected call. It was from David, Matthew's older brother. Hi, David said hesitantly. I'm not sure if you're even taking calls from the family, but I thought I'd reach out. I didn't immediately respond. I wasn't sure what David wanted, but I knew it wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. I had no intention of letting them back into my life, but curiosity got the better of me. What is it? I asked, keeping my tone even. We've fallen on hard times. You probably already know that. David's voice was quieter than usual. The house is in foreclosure, and the company, well, it's not doing great. And Eleanor, he trailed off. She's not handling it well. To be honest, we don't know how much longer we'll be able to keep up appearances. It's all falling apart. I waited a beat, letting his words sink in. I wasn't surprised by the news. After all, I'd seen the cracks in their facade long before any of this came to light. But hearing it from David himself gave me a certain satisfaction. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, but there was no sympathy in my voice. I had nothing left to offer them. But it's not my problem anymore, David. He sighed. I know. And I get it. But I'm reaching out because, well, we were hoping you might consider helping us out. You know, with the business. Your success has been incredible. Maybe there's a way we can work something out. We could help each other. I wasn't sure what to say at first. The thought of helping them after everything they had put me through was almost laughable. But then, a part of me wondered, what would it feel like to return to their world on my own terms? No, I said firmly. I've worked too hard to get where I am. I don't owe you or anyone else anything. David didn't seem shocked, just resigned. I understand, he said quietly. But I had to ask. I thought maybe. I cut him off. Don't bother asking again. I'm done. With all of you. I'm moving on. I'm not going to save you from the mess you've created. I hung up the phone, feeling a strange sense of relief. They were going to have to deal with their own consequences now. I wasn't going to be the person to bail them out. And I wasn't going to be the person they turned to when things got tough. A few days later, I received a text from Matthew. He had been trying to reach me for a while, but I had ignored his calls. This time, the message was simple: I need to see you. Can we talk? I debated whether or not to respond, but something inside me told me it was time. It wasn't for him. It was for me. I had to see if the man I once loved could understand the person I had become. We met at a small cafe, far from his family's world of opulent homes and lavish restaurants. When he sat down across from me, I noticed how much he had changed. His hair was messier than I remembered, and his clothes, though still expensive, looked a little less pristine. His eyes, once full of confidence, now held something more vulnerable. I've been thinking a lot, Matthew said, his voice low. About everything. About us. About how I treated you. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to interrupt him, though I could feel a part of me wanting to shout that it was too little, too late. I was wrong, he continued. I should have defended you. I should have stood up to my mom. I should have been there for you, but instead, I let my family and their expectations come between us. I let you feel like you weren't enough, and I'm sorry for that. I can't take back what I did, but I want to make things right. I sat there, looking at him, trying to gauge whether or not he meant it. I wanted to believe that he had changed, but part of me knew better. People don't change overnight, especially people like Matthew, raised in a world where appearances mattered more than substance. I appreciate the apology, I said after a long pause. But I'm not the same person I was when we got married. I've learned a lot in the last few months. I've learned that I don't need your family's approval. I don't need anyone's approval. Matthew's eyes softened. I've always loved you, you know. I still do. I know you do, I said gently. But love isn't enough. I need more than that. I need respect. I need someone who will stand by me when it counts, not someone who will let me be crushed under the weight of their family's judgment. He looked down at the table, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. I could see the sadness in his eyes, the regret, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I don't know what else to say, he whispered. You don't have to say anything, I replied. I'm moving forward, Matthew. I don't need to go back. I stood up to leave, and he didn't stop me. He didn't try to change my mind. And that, in itself, was the final piece I needed. I had let go. I had let go of the idea of what our relationship could have been, and in doing so, I was able to fully embrace the future I was building on my own terms. The following weeks were a blur of meetings, plans, and excitement. My business had exploded since the buyout, and I was in the process of scaling it even further. I had taken the leap, and it was paying off in ways I hadn't expected. But the biggest change wasn't in my success, it was in how I felt about myself. I didn't need anyone's validation anymore. I had finally learned that my worth wasn't tied to anyone else's opinions of me. I had built something real. I had proven to myself that I was capable of achieving everything I dreamed of, without the help of anyone who didn't truly support me. And as for Matthew's family? Their world continued to crumble around them. The mansion was sold, their financial troubles grew worse, and I couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of satisfaction. They had spent so many years belittling me, treating me as if I was less than them, and now they were paying the price for it. I had found my own success, my own identity, and my own happiness. And that, in the end, was the sweetest revenge of all.